Let's clear the air right now. Everyone says they want success, but not many want the ugly, unpolished truth about what it really costs. Because here's the reality. Success isn't glamorous. It's not effortless. And it sure as hell doesn't land in the laps of men who keep feeding themselves comforting lies to justify never moving. Today, I'm going to expose 6 of the dumbest things men say about success, the lazy excuses, the smug delusions, the bedtime stories they tell themselves so they can sleep easy while their dreams rot. If you're tired of feel-good nonsense and want the brutal, unfiltered Stoic truth like this video, subscribe for Nobi's philosophy that actually respects you enough to tell you the hard stuff. Drop a comment below. I choose truth over comfort. Let's get into it. Stupid thing 1. Success is just luck. One of the laziest things you'll ever hear come out of a man's mouth is the claim that success is nothing but luck. You'll hear it at the bar, at the coffee shop, on porches where old men watch the world go by and nurse their quiet bitterness. It's always delivered with that resigned shrug, that cynical smirk, as if they've seen too much of life to be fooled by effort. It's a comfortable lie they tell themselves because the alternative, admitting they didn't try hard enough or smart enough, is too humiliating to face. I remember sitting with an old friend years ago, watching the local mechanic's kid roll up in a new truck, business logo fresh on the side. My friend sneered and said it must be nice. Probably got lucky with the right customers, right timing. But I knew the kid. I remembered when he was 16, sweeping the shop after hours while his friends went out. I remembered him asking questions, staying late to learn, getting barked at by his old man but showing up the next morning anyway. That kid wasn't lucky. It's relentless. But it's so much easier to call it luck, isn't it? Because if it's luck, then you don't have to face your own laziness. You don't have to acknowledge the weekends you wasted on the couch while others were learning. You don't have to think about the nights you chose the easy way out, because the hard way seemed too damn lonely. Calling it luck is a way to forgive yourself for not trying. Stoicism has no patience for that sort of self-pity. It recognizes fortune's role. It knows that being born in the right place with certain opportunities matters. But it also knows that fortune is only ever the invitation. It's never the work. Seneca put it best when he said, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." That's not poetry. That's a mandate. It means the world doesn't owe you a damn thing. It means that while some doors might open for you by chance, walking through them will always be your responsibility. What the man who worships luck refuses to see is that fortune alone never sustains success. A windfall is quickly squandered by the undisciplined. An opportunity handed to an unprepared man is wasted. Even if someone is lucky enough to get a head start, it's the relentless, unglamorous work that determines whether they hold on to what they've gained. This idea hits especially hard as you get older, because you start to see the men who played the luck card their whole lives, the ones who thought their charm would carry them, who coasted on early praise and never sharpened their tools. And when the world changed, when new skills were needed, when effort was required, they were exposed. They're the bitter old men now, scoffing at the younger generation, calling them lucky instead of admitting they're hungrier. It's a harsh truth, but Stoicism doesn't shy from harsh truths. It says, look clearly at what is. Accept that you can't control fortune, but you can absolutely control your readiness for it. You can build skills. You can cultivate discipline. You can prepare yourself so that when the opportunity comes, even if it's small, even if it's late in life, you're ready to seize it with both hands. Because there's nothing sadder than a man who's given up on himself and decided it's easier to envy others. Nothing uglier than the contempt in the voice of someone who wants what another man has, but refuses to do what that man did. And there's no quicker path to irrelevance than dismissing every success you see as mere luck. If you're listening to this and recognizing that bitterness in yourself, don't run from it. Examine it. Ask yourself what opportunities you ignored because you weren't prepared. Ask what skills you could have built but didn't. And then do something about it. Because Stoicism isn't about hating fortune. It's about being so prepared that if fortune smiles at you for even a second, you're ready to make it count. And when you see that clearly, you'll be ready to face the next lie men tell themselves about success. The poisonous idea that they're too old to start. That's what we'll talk about next. Stupid thing 2, I'm too old to start. There's a cruel trick time plays on men. As the years stack up, it whispers in your ear that it's too late to change, too late to learn, too late to build something new. And many men believe it. They turn it into their personal gospel, repeating it until it becomes a truth they don't even question. This idea that age is a prison sentence for your ambitions is one of the most dangerous lies a man can tell himself. It's not just wrong, it's corrosive. It eats away at any chance you have to improve the only life you get. Think about it. When you hear a man say he's too old to start over, what's he really saying? He's saying he'd rather sit in the comfort of his disappointment than risk failing at something new. He's telling you the fear of looking foolish outweighs the possibility of growth. He's admitting he'd rather let the clock run out than face the embarrassment of trying. But that resignation is not wisdom. It's cowardice. Wearing the mask of experience? It's a quiet surrender dressed up as pragmatism. And what's worse is that it feels safe. There's no criticism for the man who doesn't try, no visible failure to explain away. But there's also no progress, no earned pride, no proof you didn't waste your last years on earth waiting to die. Stoicism offers no sympathy for this kind of self-pity. It doesn't promise you unlimited time. It forces you to see exactly how little time you might have left. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he could die at any moment. He didn't do this to frighten himself into paralysis, but to wake himself up, to make every choice, every action matter. He didn't say you're too old to begin. He said you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. It's not about pretending you're young again. You don't get to go back, but you do get to go forward. And if you have 10 years left, you have 10 years to be better than you are today. If you have 5, you have 5 to make something that will outlast you. Too many men treat their age like a verdict instead of evidence. They think the fact they've spent years making certain mistakes means they can't correct them. But that's exactly why you should. Age doesn't make you obsolete, it makes you accountable. It means you've seen enough to know what doesn't work. That experience is wasted if you don't use it to choose differently now. There's a particular kind of sadness in older men who gave up on their potential because they thought they'd missed their window. You see it in their eyes, in the way they talk about the past like it was the only time that mattered. They treat their memories as trophies because they've decided the future holds nothing for them. But Stoicism doesn't give you that out. It doesn't let you worship the past or fear the future. It drags you back to the present and says, this is all you have. What will you do with it? Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." The waste is in refusing to act now, not in failing, not in trying and coming up short, but in not trying at all. So if you're telling yourself you're too old to start something new, to fix what you broke, to learn what you ignored, to become the man you wanted to be, it's time to stop. Not because the clock has turned back, but because it hasn't. Because it's running out. Because if you don't act now, you're guaranteeing that the man you are today is the best you'll ever be. And when you face that honestly, without excuses or false modesty, you'll be ready to destroy the next lie men tell themselves about success. The poisonous belief that they somehow deserve it without ever earning it. And that's what we'll break down next. Stupid thing 3. I deserve success. There's a particularly corrosive belief that worms its way into the minds of men. It's often unspoken but dangerously present. It's the quiet conviction that you simply deserve success. That because you've worked for years, paid your dues in some fashion, suffered your share of disappointment, you're owed something from life in return. It feels righteous, it feels justified, but it's an illusion built on resentment and wounded pride. This entitlement doesn't always announce itself loudly. It might show up as bitterness toward those who seem to achieve more, as anger that life hasn't paid you back the way you think it should, as disappointment that the world hasn't noticed how hard you've tried. It's easy to fall into this trap, especially as you age. You look back on decades of effort, of sacrifice, of things you let slip away to do what you thought was right. There's a part of you that feels cheated. When success doesn't show up as a reward for being the good man, but Stoicism has no patience for that fantasy. The universe doesn't run on your sense of fairness. It doesn't hand out prizes for effort alone. You don't get success because you think you're owed it. You don't receive it as some cosmic consolation for pain endured. You earn it or you don't. And that truth stings precisely because it exposes your powerlessness over outcomes. What you do control is what you negotiate, what you endure, what you build. Success is rarely given freely. It's bargained for, piece by painful piece, often at the price of comfort, security, and approval. The man who expects otherwise reveals that he's unwilling to pay the cost. He wants the fruit without planting the seed, wants the respect without standing firm, wants the reward without shouldering the risk. Epictetus taught that the only thing within your true control is your own mind, your judgments, your choices, your responses. You don't get to dictate the results. You only get to decide what you're willing to do to earn them. When you think you deserve success simply because you want it badly enough, you're ignoring this most basic truth. Worse, you're refusing to see how that entitlement poisons your actions. Because entitlement breeds passivity. It convinces you to wait for your due instead of creating value. It replaces effort with complaint. It turns dissatisfaction into blame, aimed at the world for failing to see your worth. And men who live this way grow sour. They become experts at explaining why nothing is their fault, why luck passed them by, why everyone else had it easier. They become small in their own eyes, diminished by the very story they tell themselves about being cheated. This mindset is especially seductive for older men. The longer you've carried your burdens, the more natural it feels to think someone should reward you for that weight. You tell yourself you worked hard for decades, sacrificed for your family, played by the rules. And when the payoff doesn't come, resentment festers. But Stoicism cuts through that self-pity with surgical precision. It demands that you see that no one promised you anything, that the rules you followed were your choice. That virtue lies in how you carry your burden, not in the guarantee that someone will recognize it. A Stoic understands that life doesn't distribute prizes based on fairness. It rewards what you're willing to become, the discipline you forge, the resilience you demonstrate, the humility to recognize your limits while pushing against them anyway. Success is less a gift and more a transformation. It's the byproduct of becoming the man who can handle it. And that shift in thinking is essential because when you abandon the idea that you're owed anything, you stop waiting, you stop resenting, you start acting. You start taking full ownership of what you can change: your habits, your responses, your choices. You let go of the rest. It's a hard lesson, but it's the only one that frees you. Because once you see that no one owes you success, you finally realize you have the power to earn it. And when you embrace that responsibility, you'll be ready to recognize and dismantle the next lie men tell themselves about success. A fatal mistake of waiting around for motivation to do the work. That's what we'll take on next. Stupid thing for, I'll wait until I'm motivated. It's astonishing how many men waste decades waiting for the right feeling before they act. You'll hear them say they just need to feel ready, that they'll start when it feels right, when the timing is better, and motivation strikes like lightning and lights the path in front of them. But here's the truth that most don't want to admit. That day rarely comes, and even when it does, it doesn't stay. Motivation is a fleeting guest who's happy to drop by, charm you with grand visions, then vanish the moment it's time to roll up your sleeves. I remember working alongside a man who had no shortage of big dreams. Every lunch break, he'd talk about the business he wanted to start, the places he wanted to travel, the ways he planned to fix his health. He spoke with such passion, you'd think he was already halfway there. But he never actually began. He always had a reason to wait. Too busy at work, too tired at home, the economy wasn't right, he wasn't feeling it lately. He genuinely believed that someday the motivation would surge up in him so powerfully that he'd have no choice but to succeed. Years passed and he was still talking old or wearier, with even more reasons to delay. And that business never started. The travel, always postponed. His health? Worse than ever. The gap between the man he claimed he wanted to be and the man he actually was had become unbridgeable in his own mind. And the tragedy is, he convinced himself it wasn't his fault, because he was waiting for the right time. That's the rot that sets in when you worship motivation. You make your goals hostage to your mood. You act like your dreams are delicate things that need perfect conditions to sprout. But Stoic philosophy has no patience for that weakness. It demands that you act not because you feel like it, but because you decided it needed to be done. Seneca nailed it when he said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." The man who waits for motivation spends his life suffering in fantasies. He imagines failure so vividly that he convinces himself to do nothing. He imagines how hard it will be, how unpleasant, how embarrassing. He dreams up perfect circumstances that never materialize and uses their absence as an excuse to keep sitting still. But reality is rarely as cruel as your fears painted. Work done badly beats work never started. A step in the wrong direction is better than dying in the same chair you've sat in for decades. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel. It doesn't flatter your doubts. It simply insists you do what needs to be done because you chose to do it. This hits especially hard for older men who've carried responsibilities for so long, they've forgotten what it's like to do something purely for themselves. They've learned to be dependable for everyone but themselves. They convince themselves it's too late to change because they don't feel inspired. But if anything, age should strip away that illusion. It should teach you that feelings are the weather of the mind, changeable. It's unreliable and not something you can afford to consult before every decision. A Stoic doesn't wait for sunny days to get to work. He knows the weather is what it is, and his duty remains the same. He knows the only thing truly under his control is his choice to act. That's the kind of clarity most men avoid, because it exposes their excuses for what they are. Cowardice in a nice suit. So if you find yourself waiting to feel ready, waiting to feel brave, waiting to feel motivated, stop. You'll be waiting forever. Choose instead to act not because it's comfortable, not because it's guaranteed, but because you decided to. That's the path to anything worth having. And when you can own that truth without flinching, you're ready to see the next lie men tell themselves about success, the one that poisons the mind with envy, the claim that others simply got lucky in ways you never could. That's what we'll dig into next. Stupid thing 5? I'm not lucky like him. There's a particular kind of poison that seeps into a man's thinking when he says he isn't lucky like that guy. It sounds humble on the surface, almost self-effacing. But scrape away the politeness, and you'll find resentment hiding underneath. It's the language of a man who wants permission to stay exactly where he is without confronting why. He looks at another's success and calls it luck, so he doesn't have to see the sweat. The sleepless nights, the failures that man endured to get there. It's envy wearing the mask of resignation. A clever way of saying, I'd have that too if the universe had favored me. This isn't harmless self-talk. It's a corrosive philosophy that slowly eats away at your drive. Because if you really believe you're simply unlucky, that other men were given what you never had, then there's no reason to try, no point in learning, no need to examine your choices. It's a story that absolves you of responsibility, and for many, that's exactly why it's so seductive. It's easier to blame fate than to admit you didn't work as hard, weren't as disciplined, didn't take the same risks, or didn't hold the line when life pressed back. Stoicism has no patience for this lie. It doesn't deny that circumstances differ. Life deals us all different hands, but it refuses to let that be an excuse. Epictetus taught that we don't control the cards we're given, only how we play them. He didn't promise fairness. He promised freedom from the illusion that you can blame anyone else for what you do with what you have. When you say you're not lucky like him, you're giving up your agency. You're putting your entire future in the hands of chance while pretending you're being realistic. It's a quiet surrender, but a surrender all the same, and it has consequences. Because over time, that envy becomes a habit of thought. You start measuring your worth against others in ways you can't control. You grow bitter at their successes instead of learning from them. You don't ask how they did it. You don't see their mistakes as lessons. You just stew in the certainty that life gave them something it denied you. Marcus Aurelius had no tolerance for this mindset. He wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." That line is a hammer to the skull of envy. It says, stop analyzing others. Stop comparing. Stop complaining. Do the work. Become the man you admire, instead of explaining why you can't. Stoicism doesn't coddle you with comforting lies. It doesn't care if you were born rich or poor, gifted or average, loved or overlooked. It simply asks, what will you do now? What is in your power? What excuse are you ready to burn to the ground? Because that's the only way forward. This philosophy isn't for men who want to feel better about failure without changing anything. It's for men willing to confront the brutal truth that most of their limitations are self-imposed. That the gap between them and the man they envy is measured less in luck than in choices. And it's especially important to understand this as you get older, because age gives you a long list of people to compare yourself to: old friends who did better, colleagues who climbed higher, men who seemed to have everything fall into place while you struggled. But sitting in that bitterness is a choice. You can let it define you, or you can see it as proof of what's possible when you stop blaming luck and start demanding more of yourself. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Envy is one of the worst wastes of all. It gives you no insight, no plan, no improvement. Just the cheap satisfaction of telling yourself you would have been great too, if only luck had cooperated. So if you've caught yourself thinking you're not lucky like him, stop. Recognize it for what it is. Not truth, not realism, just cowardice in a convincing disguise. Refuse to let that thought pass unchallenged. Ask instead what you can do today to close the gap between who you are and who you want to be. Because when you understand this, you're ready to confront the next lie men tell themselves about success. The coward's refrain that it's simply too hard to even try, and that's what will break apart next. Stupid thing 6. It's too hard. It's remarkable how quickly men will surrender to the phrase, "it's too hard." They speak it softly at first, like an apology, then repeat it so often it becomes their mantra. It's the universal get-out-of-jail-free card for not trying. Because if something is too hard, you're off the hook. You don't have to face the discomfort of failure. You don't have to wrestle with inadequacy. You don't have to find out where you actually stand. But here's the fact that most refuse to admit. Anything of value in this life is hard. It's supposed to be. Difficulty isn't an obstacle placed in your path to keep you out. It's the gatekeeper that filters out the uncommitted. It ensures that only those willing to endure its demands earn the reward. That's not cruelty. That's fairness in its rawest form. Yet we live in an age that wants to redefine that truth as cruelty itself. Men are encouraged to believe that if something feels uncomfortable, it's wrong for them. That adversity is unfair. That struggle is proof they're on the wrong path. So they give up not because it's truly impossible, but because they've decided they shouldn't have to fight for it. Stoic philosophy obliterates that delusion. It doesn't dress hardship up in poetry or pretend it's pleasant. It states bluntly that life will test you. It will force you to choose between ease and growth, between comfort and meaning. Epictetus reminded us that difficulties are things that show what men are, not what they claim to be, not what they hope others will believe about them, but what they actually are when the pressure is on. The man who flinches at difficulty reveals himself. He shows that his ambition was cosmetic, that his resolve was for display only. He might have had big dreams, grand ideas, the right words, but when reality asked for sacrifice, he walked away. He convinced himself that wisdom lay in recognizing when something was too hard, but more often, that wasn't wisdom. It was fear wearing the robes of prudence. This is especially true for older men who've already weathered their share of storms. It's easy to think you've earned the right to avoid new challenges. You've done enough. That trying again is for the young with their energy and illusions. But age should bring clarity. It's not cowardice clarity, that life's meaning doesn't fade because your hair is gray. Clarity that purpose isn't something you retire from while waiting for the end. A Stoic doesn't seek difficulty for its own sake, doesn't romanticize suffering. But he refuses to turn away from what matters simply because it asks something of him. He assesses the weight of the burden, decides if it's worthy, and then carries it without whining. He knows that what you choose to bear defines you far more than what you say you want. Seneca wrote, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that they are difficult." That insight is devastating because it removes every excuse. It says the obstacle is often not the world, but your unwillingness to begin. Your refusal to persist, your fear of the cost. So if you're the kind of man who's been whispering to himself that it's too hard, stop pretending you're being realistic. Admit what you're really saying, that you don't want it enough, that you're not willing to pay, that you'd rather watch from the sidelines, commenting on how hard the game is than step onto the field and risk losing. Because there's no shame in admitting you're not ready. The shame is in dressing that cowardice up as wisdom and selling it to yourself as virtue. If you're not ready to carry the weight, say so. But don't claim it was too heavy for anyone to lift, because there's always someone out there proving it can be done. And once you can see that truth without flinching, you're ready to hear the final piece of Stoic clarity. That the world doesn't hand out success to those who want it, but to those willing to become worthy of it. And that's the understanding you'll need to actually change your life. Conclusion. If any of this stung a little good, that means you're still awake enough to feel it. The world doesn't respect pretty lies or carefully crafted excuses. It doesn't hand out trophies for good intentions or soothe your wounded ego when you fail to act. It respects the man who calls himself out first, the one who admits his fears, owns his laziness, and does the damn work anyway. That's the man it rewards. So if you're done whispering these stupid lines to yourself to feel better about standing still, like this video, subscribe for unapologetic Stoic truth that doesn't coddle you but challenges you. And drop a comment below. I choose truth over comfort. Because you deserve to stop talking about success like a dream and start living it like a reality.